on the internet that they really admire in this like weird fangirl stroke boy way.
Yes, Rose.
That got super weird super fast. Remy is my Jess Rose. Just an incredible technologist who's done really, really wonderful work, great projects, co-authored a book on HTML5, runs great developer conferences, which I think the organizers here can back up that that's super easy. And he's going to be talking to us about the potential, just the beauty and the majesty of the web and technology in general. So if you'd all please give a very warm welcome to Remy.
My mic's on? My mic's on. Okay, so the web is a beautiful place. It's open to all, and it's simple and complicated. And there's a lot of talk of, well, there has been a lot of talk of the web is dead, web versus native. So I wanted to ask myself, why do I so strongly believe in the web? What makes me feel that way even more strongly today than ever before? And how can we keep the web an open and welcoming place? So, my name is Remy Sharp. I've been working on the web since the late 90s. I've been running my own business for the last 10 years, just basically doing a lot of code. I've got a bunch of side projects. JSBin's one of them. It's not a success business. It's one of those failures. I also run my own my own conference that's about the web. I'm very, very passionate about the web in the first place. This is not a technical talk. Hopefully, it's a call to arms. So, it's the simplicity of the web that I love. The connected documents. Born out of connected documents linking from one page to another in some kind of dark corner. Obviously, there's a new generation of developers that are looking to do a lot more inside of browsers, but it's that it doesn't matter how complicated it gets, the web is still beautifully simple, and what we can do on it is still beautifully simple. Anyone can do it. Anyone can take a document, put some p tags inside of it, serve it up onto a page, make it as complicated or refined as they want, and it will render in a browser. The web is unabashed of its content, and anything and everything goes on there. There's this amazing abundance of free resources, libraries, frameworks, tools that make our life easier. But you can also still write the bare bones of the web programming language to make a website. And I often conflate the word web with browsers. Browsers are amazing. This free bit of software that we all have access to, they take plain text and translate it all into something that's interactive, that I can make magical or creative or beautiful. And there's new APIs appearing in browsers all the time. There have been. There's trials coming out in things like Chrome. Servo is an example of how they're pushing the boundaries or questioning how browsers should even render in the first place. So this is the JS13K winner of 2006 JS Games. And when I saw it, it looks like the kind of thing I would expect to see on a console or in an arcade. But it's a full screen game with sound, which I've got muted at the moment, immersive experience, lots of levels, really amazing graphics, or amazing graphics for this type of game. But it's just in a browser. There's no plugins or anything like that. The whole thing, zipped up, is 13K. Okay? Most thumbnails are bigger than 13K. So the web constantly amazes me. It gives us free access to information and ideas. It constantly challenges me, constantly makes me laugh. It's this infinite rabbit hole that you can easily fall down and discover new things. And it's content that's put out there by ordinary, amazing people just wanting to share what they have. I get to work on the web, and I'm hugely humbled by that. This is a platform where education can happen, where change happens, where revolutions are made. So it's it inspires me at least. I like this quote not because of its real sentiment, but because this is kind of the strap line for my job. The web is the most hostile software engineering environment imaginable. This is not a bad thing. This is the challenge of working on the web. This is what makes it interesting. Dealing with this hostility of the web is exciting. Having lots of browsers to get your content to work in doesn't have to render exactly the same, given that we have mobile phones and larger devices. But the experience, the user is still able to perform the same experience. That's the challenge of our work. It's not writing just a function that works. At JSBin, I tried to get it to work in IE7 and IE8 whilst it was still popular, and it did work. But that was the most challenging part of solving some of the problems there. Along the way, I lost, the usage went much further down. I kind of dropped, accidentally, support for IE8. But this is effectively my job description. I think this is the challenge that we have for working on the web. So I wanted to just touch on some of the reasons why I get so inspired by the web, why I think that delivering to it is so exciting. So I'm definitely not an engineer. This is the opinion of my own kind of development process. I see engineers as people being a lot smarter than me, being able to solve computer science problems. To me, I'm a web developer, which basically means I tinker with things, which effectively means taking things apart, trying to put them back together again, either seeing if they still work, or if I broke it, or if it does something different in that process. I use computers as my creative outlet, and I need to be creative to keep happy, and the web is my distribution platform. I contribute to the web for very little money. All I need is an internet connection, a very, very expensive machine, and some kind of hosting, and that's it. The rest I can learn by myself and put it out on the web. And when I was a student, I didn't have the money. I could access the university machines and use websites like GeoCities or AngelFire, if anyone remembers those websites, to just host content freely. And I know that there's websites out there now. So the cost of playing, the cost of actually contributing is particularly low. And you can even write web code on your mobile phones or mobile devices. This is a trite example, but I really like it. It's a text file with 2 words, hello world, and I put it in the browser. And the browser did all the work to make it render. I think that's amazing. I've written no code, and now I have an interface that a user can consume my content. As simple as it is, but the browser still put the DOM around it. It still gave me a body tag. It still styled it so it was consumable. Browsers are amazing, and browsers are empowering. So I realize that some people may not know what Netscape is. Netscape is an old browser. Anyway, so I used to think that IE was way worse than Netscape, okay? And Netscape was much smaller installable file. It was much faster, and it was a strict browser. It was really good at rendering, much better than IE. And with time, I've come to learn that I was wrong. And the reason I was wrong, and the reason why IE was so much bigger and so much slower, is I had a lot more work to do, because IE was forgiving. If I had this is back in the day of table to layouts, but if I had a table tag and a TD missing on the page, IE would still make its best attempt to actually render the rest of the page. It would still get that content to my users, the people who are visiting my website. Netscape, on the other hand, would leave you with an almost entirely blank page because it couldn't find that closing tag, and it would just give you a white screen, which I'm starting to see more of today with JavaScript being entirely in the client, but that's a whole different thing. Anyway, IE was forgiving, and browsers today are really forgiving for the amount of bad code we put into the browsers, again, bad HTML, bad CSS. You can get away with some broken JavaScript at some degree. This is really empowering. It means that the barrier to entry is very low, which means we have more content, and it's accessible to more. So this is kind of the crux of why I love the web. This is a Scion 3 that my dad got when I was in the early 90s. And it was a PDA. It came with instruction manuals, which it seems that no technical device today comes with anymore. But inside of this manual was, it mentioned that it had an SDK. So a software development kit that I could write code that would run on this little computer. And I wanted to write a game. I really, really wanted to write a game. I wanted to create something on this little computer. I'd already written some Visual Basic, where basically you draw your user interface and you wire it up to some basic code and it does a thing, so you can interact with it. But if I want to do anything more complicated, it required Visual C++, which as a 13-year-old I just didn't want to learn, way beyond my skill set at the time. And because this was a very small machine, theoretically there was less code to learn. I fired up my modem, my 14K modem, found the FTP website, started downloading this the zip file of the SDK in the morning, came back in the evening, and unzipped 2 meg worth of PDFs and directories containing C files and H files, and I just didn't have a clue where to start. Okay, the manual did have a hello world, but it expected me to understand how to compile and how to link and what external libraries I would need and where they would go and where they belong. And there was this huge prerequisite of knowledge required to be able to do something on this thing. The web does not have that. Now we have SDK-like offerings like Ember and React and Polymer and so on. They are SDK-like libraries. You do not have to use them to be able to do something on the web. There are amazing build tools that make life a lot easier, but you also don't have to use them. And you do not have to learn everything. Okay, this is a modern digital camera broken down into its component parts, pre-built component parts. You could build a pinhole camera, like one of the first cameras, with some direction from the internet, but basically with a piece of cardboard, light, and something that can expose an image. There's not a lot of technology involved to do that. This, on the other hand, there's no single individual that knows how to build a whole digital camera, and that's the cost of technical advancement. Okay, so if you want to build a website that has amazingly beautiful design and really, really good UX and animations and offline first push service worker geolocation goodness, it's going to be hard, right? You're probably going to have to read a book or two. And assuming you have all the parts and you've got all the build tools, the job is still going to be daunting, and that's just the job, right? It's complicated, but it doesn't have to be the only way. You do not have to learn everything. Okay, give yourself a little bit of breathing space. So this is my favorite aspect of developing for browsers. The simplicity of knowledge required to be able to actually make something and get something that I can play with and share with other people is very little. It's easy to kind of get disheartened or feel a bit disparaged with the amount of new tools being published every day, but just remember that it can be simple, and when you're talking to your peers or newcomers, I think you should be repeating that message, that it can be simple. They don't have to know all the things to be able to build a website. So, I want to talk about some of the things that I think that can help us kind of get there and be better at what we do. So for me personally, my love lies in JavaScript. I've been writing it for a long time, and I will tell anyone who is doing anything with JavaScript to take time to learn the language. Now, it's not a prerequisite of doing anything, like you don't have to learn JavaScript before you can build a website, certainly not. But if you're building something with React, loop back and learn the language as well, because you'll have a better understanding of the tools that you're using. Same with HTML and CSS. If you understand the tools that you're working with, then you can be better at your job because you have more understanding of what it's capable of in the first place. Browser APIs, there's a wealth of technology inside of these browsers, and it's worth kind of getting an idea of what the browser is capable of. I'm not saying abort what you're learning. I'm not saying drop frameworks and just learn the language and write your own framework. I'm just saying if you understand how it works, then you can go further. You can understand maybe why something isn't performing the way you want it to, or why something's difficult, or so on. I'd encourage you to solve problems, not put solutions to problems. Like that. What I mean by that is well, what I mean by that is the tech community are very good at identifying the new and shiny and saying, right, I'm going to use this to solve that problem or that piece of client work. Take time to understand the problem, and that comes with knowing your tools. If you know what tools are available to you, then you can have a better understanding of different ways you can solve that same problem. Contrary to that, have fun. Okay? I wanted to have a slide about ES6 because I haven't used ES6 much in my day-to-day work in previous years. I've been a latecomer to it, someone who writes a lot of JavaScript. But I didn't want to use a transpiler. I don't generally use Babel I haven't used Babel until this year mostly. And I do use ES6 now, but mostly because it makes me feel cool when I write it. And that's okay, right? I like arrow functions because they look cool, not because it binds to this. I usually forget that it binds to this, to be honest. I like the default param arguments because I come from a Perl background from like 1999, and that was in Perl, and I always wanted it in JavaScript, right? I like the other bits and bobs, mostly because it makes my code look funky. And if I need to deploy to a non-ES6 environment, in Node, what I'll do is I'll do the transpile in my continuous integration process, so I never have to actually write the ES5 part, I never see it. And if I have to go to a browser, I'll actually look at some of this stuff and just de-sugar it, because that's all it is, it's just sugar. That arrow function looks cool to me, but it's just the word function in there. I swap it out and it works in Safari, because I have an old version of OS X. Anyway, do learn your browser APIs, and that doesn't mean get a deep knowledge of what the browser's browser API, how they work, or what they all are, but skim through them, certainly. There's tons of cool stuff. I mean, geolocation is not one, but you can send beacons from browsers. Not Bluetooth beacons, but beacons back to servers to say, oh, the user just left your website. You can read files, you can read cameras, you can read microphones, you can do peer-to-peer. I think someone was trying to read USB data over a microphone once. There's the fetch API, there's advanced XHR, there's blobs, there's typed arrays, loads of really cool stuff that's actually in the browser. What I do is I tend to either follow the Twitter handles for each of the browsers to see what they're announcing. I also kind of go spelunking into W3C specs, not to read them because nobody's got that willpower, but just to kind of skim through and see what I'm missing. And something I used to do way back was actually open up the DevTools, or the Firebug at the time, and just look at the window object, and I would just skim through what was actually exposed on the API. I haven't started my timer, so I have no idea where I'm up to. Anyway. There's a song I like that has a line, do one thing that scares you every day, which is an extremely tall order. But I think just get out your comfort zone every now and then is kind of the middle ground. And what I mean by that, for like advice from me, I'm pretty much anti-framework. For a few, I've kind of identified the reasons why. But if I don't want to use a framework, every now and then I should use a framework to understand what I'm missing. Obviously, they're popular because people use them. Why? What will I learn by getting out my comfort zone? If you always use frameworks, switch out. If you always go to developer conferences, try going to a design conference or a UX conference, and as a designer, try going to a developer conference, if only to learn how to communicate with your peers. If you only follow white dudes on Twitter, try mixing it up. And I'm pretty certain I was guilty of that a few years in. Okay, so I had a recent piece of client work where I had kind of a very fixed amount of time. I decided that I would actually try React for the first time. I've never touched React, I'd kind of even questioned what it was. And the experience was very positive in the end. I did it in a week, I got exactly what I needed to do, but it had that very steep learning curve for me, which I'm not super keen on. I like to just know how to solve the problem. But I did the upfront work to kind of decide whether or not I needed that technology, compared it to the approach I would normally take, and it made sense to try out. So I definitely got out of my comfort zone. Try and vary your sources of content for reading. I'm actually not great at reading, mostly because it takes me a long time. Like if I have the blog post that say 2-minute read, that's out by about 18 minutes for me, typically. So I either try and like listen to audio at double speed, or try and consume more content from different places. But try and consume more content from different places. That will broaden your ideas and broaden kind of the types of problems that you see. The writing one, I think, is actually really valuable. This doesn't particularly mean go and start blogging everything that you're working on, and that may not be what you want to do, but if you're able to write either like readmes for documentation or issues or blog posts. I mean, my first blog posts were mostly about the films that I watched, but writing and doing so continuously actually makes you better at communicating. It teaches you how to communicate with other people, teaches you how to break down what you want to say into kind of understandable sentences, unlike what I just said. It's a bit like the rubber duck debugging technique, right? If you're working on a problem, you've been stuck on this bug for like 3 hours, and you have to take a step away from the machine. Before you can ask someone to help you, you get your rubber duck or your teddy bear, something, yeah, that isn't a person, and you explain the problem to them. And in explaining that problem, you're able to communicate the idea, the problem that you're dealing with, articulate it, and normally, or typically, the answer will be revealed in that explanation because you've broken it down into a consumable format. Try and share as well. Again, this doesn't have to be to the whole world. I like putting my stuff out to the web and just kind of seeing where it goes. A lot of the time, stuff I put out on the web doesn't go anywhere. It goes about as far as fleeting moment on someone's Twitter timeline, and that's it. But maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you don't feel comfortable enough to do that, but share it with your peers. Get some input from an external, from the outside. So I said at the beginning, the web is open, and it is open to all. That doorway may be open, but how you're received on the other side is totally different depending on who you are, what your background is, what your gender is, and what your race is. This is something that I'm trying to make sure I do and have been for a few years, and I would encourage you as well to try and raise the voices of others. So I work alone. I work on my own, like I have my own consultancy. And Twitter is basically my workplace. And it's a distant second to actually working with other human beings. And it's too easy to surround ourselves with like-minded people or team fit, right? Because you end up with people that come from the same background and the same privilege as you do. I worked in a company for 10 years, and the first 5 years, it was nearly all white guys in the tech team and the company almost, pretty much. We're all in between 20 and 30. We all came from kind of a middle-class background. We all enjoyed drinking and getting drunk and having a laugh. And you realize that actually we're all the same, right? We don't have that diversity of ideas even. And now, diversity to me results in different ideas, different experiences, different challenges, different solutions, more ideas, more creativity, positive things. So we need to be continuously working towards this. There is no end goal. This is just a journey. And different people learn at different speeds. This is something else that I've learned over the last couple of years, that it's not just simple. I've read a lot of tutorials or blog posts that explain how something works, but there's this miscommunication from me as the author to say, well, you just have to go and install Node. Actually, on that note, pretty much every Python project I've ever found on GitHub, I've never been able to use because they seem to skip the bit that is install that package. I've literally never been able to install a Python project. And the point is, as the author of that content, when I say it's just easy, really what I'm trying to say to you is, trust me, I will guide you through this. But by saying it's just easy, that could be misconstrued as, this is easy, you should be able to get this, right? If you don't, you're kind of a bit stupid and I'm smarter than you. So try dropping those words and see how it reads, and it may not need those words at all. I think there are linters for things like Sublime and Atom that get rid of, highlight these words. So, I am excited about the web today, the technology that's there today, and for the longest time I wanted to be able to create software and share it with the world and tinker with ideas. We've got some really cool technology that's landing in browsers. This is a WebVR demo using a JavaScript library called A-Frame, which is doing all the 3D scene. That, combined with WebGL, I think totally blows open the door to gaming over the web. You'd have to download 300 meg over the wire to be able to join these games. Very cool, landing inside browsers now, and I mean, I got one of those cardboard things, boxes that you put your phone into, no expensive technology. I just want to show you a short video of physical web. So I'm just going to talk through the what's going on in this video. This is a Sphero toy, pretty much like that thing. And the individual has taken it out of the box and turned it on, and it has a beacon inside of it. They've taken their phone, and the phone has discovered the URL that the device is beaconing out. So the little bro, I think. They tap on it, it takes you to a URL. That URL does Bluetooth discovery and says, can I try and connect to that device? The phone is now paired to the toy, loads up a web page, it talks over web Bluetooth, and they're now playing with that toy, having unboxed it 30 seconds beforehand. There was no go to the App Store, find the right app, hit open, install, accept all permissions, open it, go find the Bluetooth thing. That was just done in a web page, which I think is really very, very cool. But this is where I think, this is where I have most of my excitement, progressive web apps. So the first scripting I ever did was something called Windows shell scripting. And basically what you would do is you use HTML and JavaScript, and you could put it into a page, but the extension was .hta instead of .html. And when you opened it in Windows 3.1 or something like that, it would launch like a little application. And you had all the UI components that HTML could give you, but it was in this little app that you could share with your friends. And I built this image preview thing. I could like grab files, drop them into I think I had to put the path into this little application, and it would just cycle those images. I found that really, really empowering. I didn't have to write any magical software for Windows for it to work. Years later, we get PhoneGap, where we can use web technology to create first-class applications, actually get them onto those mobile phones, and get access to technology that wasn't available at the time, like the geolocation of the device, and the accelerometer, and the camera, and all the things that weren't there at the time. And then we've had everything in between, like Java applets, Flash, even the HTML5 app cache. But there were always halfway houses to web applications. They always felt a little bit uncanny. So progressive web apps, to me, are the culmination of decades of progress. All the best ideas brought together under one umbrella term. And all browsers, barring one, are making huge progress to implementing these technologies. That barring one is Safari, and I believe that it will be pulled up, kicking and screaming, to support this technology. So there's two things in particular that really excite me about progressive web apps. The first one is complete control over the network. So that means that I can decide how my web application is going to render if there's no Wi-Fi, if there's poor Wi-Fi, if there's Wi-Fi and then no Wi-Fi and then Wi-Fi and then no Wi-Fi, or connectivity, like in a bad network. Or if it's offline altogether, or I can load things directly from the cache, or I can swap them in. Having actually control over what's served into the page, in controlling it in my code, gives me a lot of power in the browser. And the second thing is treating my web app as a first-class citizen on the home page. So I had an experience a while back. I used to own an iPhone, and I had to wipe it and reinstall everything. And one thing I noticed as I reinstalled everything is all the bookmarks that I put on my home screen were there instantly and ready to go. And all the other apps just had this kind of like faded out thing that was just loading, and just ages for all those to load. These, I'm not having to download like 40 meg over the wire just to have like a messaging app or a file sharing app. And this is actually my home screen, and those are progressive web apps on my screen that I use regularly enough to actually save them to my phone. So I want to talk about some of the case studies just briefly. So Flipkart is one of the largest e-commerce websites in India, and Google have been collecting case studies of companies that are using this technology and recording kind of how they're performing. So Flipkart temporarily shut down their mobile offering and switched to a progressive web app, and recorded 3 times more activity on the site, 40% higher engagement, as in people were doing things on the website, 3 times lower data usage because of the way the application had been designed. There was an article, Jason Grigsby released a post like just this week talking about how I think it's the Washington Post website is working, it's performing better on iOS than the regular website because it has this progressive web app design, because everything's just a little bit leaner, a little bit, the architecture was better. It was literally released like a couple of days ago, so I don't have it in here, but it's worth looking up. Jason Grigsby, progressive web app, Washington Post. But this is the really big number, the 70% greater conversions from the home screen. The fact that the app was on the home screen led people to be more engaged in their e-commerce website, and they were buying more things. This is super valuable to businesses. I've worked in technology for a long time. I've known what's good for businesses from a technological point of view, but it's money that drives change, not web standards. And this kind of thing is what makes businesses kind of perk up and listen. So progressive web apps, it may sound like a marketing term, but if it equals these kind of figures, then companies can go for them. This is another case study I really like. Push notifications are part of this progressive web app. And this is beyond the rack, so kind of shopping for clothes and shoes and so on. The part I like is we saw a direct 20% click-through rate from push notifications. So this is when the browser is completely closed or can be completely closed, and they're able to push notifications directly into the phone. I assume everyone's familiar with what push notification looks like on a phone, but this is using web technology where the browser said, do you want us to send you push notifications at the right time? I visited websites which ask me immediately, and all it is some kind of like news website. I don't care. And you get hellbound at that point. If you ask your user too early, or they're not invested in actually accepting, you're not going to be able to get out of that sin bin, basically. But they had this push notification system. If the user accepted, they would get a notification saying maybe, the thing that you had in your basket, it's the last one, it's the last item in stock. Do you want to buy it? That would lead me to actually engaging with the website and say, yeah, I want that thing. I just forgot I put it in there. So progressive web apps break down into, this is kind of an overview of what's involved in a progressive web app. They're reliable because you have control over the network. They're secure because they have to be served over HTTPS. To be able to get any of these toys, any of this technology, you have to go over HTTPS. There's also the permissioning model is as you need it. I'm not an iOS user anymore, but I understand that the permissioning model has changed. It's more on demand. Certainly when I install an app from the Android store, it asks me for all the permissions at once. And if I want to get the app in there, I have to accept and then go and disable them one at a time. But obviously the web does it as you need it, and it doesn't break if you reject. You can handle it. They're performant because it needs to be performant, it needs to be fast, it needs to be responsive to the user in terms of they tap the screen and it wants to feel buttery smooth, that kind of 60 frames a second. But also it wants to work on any mobile device. Google are now penalizing non-mobile websites, and they're penalizing those sites that have those big kind of overlays in their search results. They're encouraging developers to create mobile-friendly websites. And that availability, having it on the home screen and being able to push notifications in. So the technology is service workers. My head is very much in the web. If you haven't heard of service workers and you're in the web, you've been under a rock. But Jake Archibald is probably the person to go and Google for service workers. Service workers. HTTPS is, again, the doorway to getting service workers, and service workers is the doorway to getting pretty much everything else, like push notifications, background sync, network control, and everything like that. HTTP2 isn't part of a progressive web app, but it means that you get HTTPS by default, and you can also do things like push messaging and preemptive fetching for assets and so on. So generally improves the performance of your web app. The manifest is what determines whether the user can add it to the home screen, what kind of icons are going to be used, whether or not it's standalone. So it's actually a standalone application on your phone that you can dismiss away without closing your browser, or if you want to open it in the browser. And you can also force the orientation. So if you're building a game, a common thing is I want to open in my own application and I want it to be in portrait, landscape. Yeah. Well, it depends on the game, right? It might be that one that jumps. But anyway. And yeah, the push notifications API is the re-engagement part. It's just an example of a manifest file. It was really to show you that there's not a lot to it. It's just a JSON format. There's requirements for you have to have a short name and name, an icon that's 144 by 144 as a minimum, a start URL. So if the user goes to your home screen and adds the web app, your start point when they launch from the icon, it doesn't have to be the page that they're on. You can launch them into a deeper part of the website. In this case, I'm actually adding Google Analytics tracking, so I can see how many people are coming from the home screen. And then the display type. So in this case, my Suite app is a standalone app. So to build this slide deck, I wanted to get screenshots from my phone. And I went to the App Store. I mean, I didn't want to email myself a screenshot from my phone, right? That felt a little bit too kind of 2010. And I didn't want to hang out myself a screenshot, because that just gets weird. I'm talking to myself and I'm responding. And so I was like, I need to get an app on my phone that I can just send screenshots to my desktop, right? So I went searching, and I ended up with 3 different apps that I installed, all of which didn't quite do what I wanted. And like any normal web developer, I complained on Twitter. And someone actually sent back a link to a website, and I initially thought this was just spam and they were just kind of promoting themselves. But the website they gave me actually did exactly what I needed to. So I went to this website, snapdrop.net. I'm almost out of time. And it was an open source project, talk about the technology that was underneath, but it did exactly what I needed it to. I opened up my phone and my laptop, just a URL, I tapped on the icon on my phone, and I could just send the image to my laptop, and it just said, do you want to download it? And that was it. And that was a progressive web app, and that ended up on my home screen immediately. Okay? The add to home screen needs HTTPS, service workers, and a manifest. But the point is, when I add it to my home screen, this app will open and load when I tap on it, and it must open and load when I tap on it. There's a high barrier to entry to getting those apps on the home screen, because we're creating a trust between your software and the user. They have to know that when they open it, when they tap on it, it will load, just like a native app from the App Store. This is our opportunity to change how the web is perceived. So I want web developers to rally behind view source and being able to look at code and being able to see how things work. I want developers and people to rally behind open source and sharing and learning from those components, behind browsers and the technology that's there and what's available. In your web community, help each other, like file issues, learn how to contribute, filing issues, documentation, blogging, which helps learning and learning more, learning different ideas, and rally behind the web. I want to keep it open. We can keep it open. I want to keep it simple. I want to see how simple it can still be. I want to keep it welcoming. So we need to keep sharing, keep working, keep getting that barrier of entry for contributing to the web lower. So we can grow as so the web can grow as a diverse place and welcoming to all. So this is our time to do it right, and we have to be the living standard. Thanks.